So this whole situation with Anthem and BioWare keeps on giving. We have plenty of stuff to talk about since my previous video, including a whole bunch of new replies coming out from BioWare, a new big content update being announced, tons of feedback from the fan base, but there's also talks about a possible class action lawsuit against the whole company, about pulling back Anthem, about relaunching it in a better state, and a lot more on top of this. So we're going to go ahead and check all of this in just a bit, but before doing so, I'm going to take a quick moment to thank Instant Gaming for sponsoring today's video. If you guys want to buy cheap games, then you can follow the links in the description for some really awesome discounts, and you'd also be supporting this channel in the process. But with that being said and done, let's get started with some of the replies coming out from BioWare and some other hints towards a big update coming up soon. The first one came from Anthem's global community manager yesterday as a reply to people asking if there's going to be another live stream planned for today, and the answer was that there's not going to be one right now. According to the reply, we're working on when exactly the next live stream will be to show up new content coming in our big April update. There was another reply coming out from Andrew Johnson on Reddit, who said, "We're still reading, still preparing for the next things to come. As we've seen growing frustration when we reply to threads without a concrete answer we're ready to share, we are just trying to avoid frustrating anyone with teases. I hope you all know that your input is still very much appreciated, and we'll share news as soon as we have it. Whatever this update is, I truly hope it's going to bring some actual content in the game and provide some meaningful loot drops and cosmetic drops in the process from those Elysian caches. I do hope for Anthem's sake and BioWare's sake that this update will also bring the new armors, weapons, and the masterwork skills we've seen data mined a few days back. Right now, I'm seeing many of you guys being more pissed about the loot situation rather than what happened during Anthem's development cycle, so I guess it's more important for players to have their game working properly rather than whatever the latest controversy is. I get that. I think the only way BioWare can even get out of this mess at this point is by providing meaningful updates and keeping the fan base better informed. At least that's my opinion. Someone even came in with a great suggestion over on Reddit on how BioWare could handle some parts of their communication, mainly the ones dedicated to tracking the current issues. And one Reddit user suggested a route similar to how Battlefield 5 subreddit does it, as in having one of the community managers manage a dedicated thread of known issues and mark them as being acknowledged by the team or being worked upon, maybe even define a date up until a fix would be implemented for them. I think that sounds like a very good suggestion, honestly, and something like this would do a much better job at giving the player base a better understanding of what's currently happening behind the scenes, rather than a bunch of vague statements that might take a few days to be delivered on Reddit or on Twitter. A clear and concise bullet-pointed list of current top priority issues and planned fixes does a much better job at providing meaningful communication than whatever other stuff is being replied on various forums. Such a thread can even be updated with some new tracked issues, and people can always go back to it and check it out rather than searching for that random reply that got buried on Reddit or on Twitter. Anyway, let's move over to some of the other replies that came in on the topic of the game's development. BioWare's general manager Casey Hudson came in a few hours back with some more replies on this issue, and he said, "I think some people are seeing our support for our developers named in the article as dismissing the need to continue making improvements in our workplace. Not at all." Then he came in with, "Part of what interested me about returning to BioWare was the challenge of building a new leadership team around solving precisely these problems. We have more to do, but creating a happy and rewarding work environment remains our top priority." And even the article Jason Schreier posted a couple of days back did mention that ever since Casey Hudson came in and ever since the studio's new leadership got shifted, things finally started going forward and Anthem started finally getting some shape. This version of Anthem that we see today was made possible in the last 1 or 2 years, which a lot of people call to be impressive, and it would be if they didn't have 7 whole years to do something. But with a reputation so tainted in light of the recent uncoverings, I don't see any statement that BioWare could come up with that wouldn't end up digging their own hole even more. So whatever they would be saying right now, there's a 100% guarantee that they will always get bashed no matter what. Anyway, the news doesn't go that well for BioWare anyway, as later on it's been revealed by a couple of BioWare employees that the studio's management hasn't talked to the staff about the article in question, and instead the company even sent out emails yesterday with a main message saying don't talk to the press, so pretty much trying to silence them as much as possible. But if you think that this stuff only affects BioWare, well, let's just say that other reports are saying that this is pretty much an industry standard. You can replace Bioware with pretty much any studio and it's the same story according to some of the stuff that is being talked, and I would even argue that you can replace gaming industry with literally any other one over there and come up with similar situations. I'm sure many of you who watch my videos have all kinds of jobs, and I'm going to be straight with you right now on this one. Even with the very employee-friendly laws we have here in the EU, myself as well as a lot of my peers were pulling 10 to 12 hours a day working at our jobs, and even more so especially as fresh graduates a couple of years back. You can ask anyone who's working in a somewhat good paying white-collar job that deals with consumers and they will always give you that one single answer, and that is that they have to work overtime. That is like one of the biggest issues right now going on, so it's a generalized problem, but bringing these issues up to light at least helps informing people about it and encourages a lot more people to discuss about it. Anyway, I digress, so I don't really want to stay on that issue too much. It's not a topic of this video, but in light of the recent problems, many fans are now suggesting that pulling out Anthem altogether and relaunching it sometime later, much like how it happened with Final Fantasy XIV, would be a better solution. There's a couple of highly upvoted Reddit threads right now on this subject. One of them had almost 15,000 upvotes at the time I was checking it, and argues that the game is just a shell of what it was supposed to be and that Bioware should pretty much shut it down for now, fix everything and relaunch it as a whole new game a few months later. I mean, that one pretty much worked very well for Final Fantasy XIV, which is now probably one of the best MMOs out there, but one of the users also knows the fact that the entire team pretty much went through some major restructuring following its initial failure, of course talking about Final Fantasy XIV. Another similar thread points out the fact that Final Fantasy XIV was in an even worse state than Anthem is at launch, and the reboot should be considered as the game has a huge potential. Other users even suggested calling it Anthem Beyond, of course referencing the fact that the game's original name was planned to be Beyond, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is extremely fun according to another user, but since everything else around it in terms of design philosophies and systems being so broken, simply updating it won't make the cut, which is why a relaunch is suggested. Now tell me what you guys think about this, of this whole relaunching Anthem idea. Would you be okay with Bioware shutting the game down for the upcoming months and then relaunching it in a much better state? Do you agree or disagree with this route? For me personally, while it does sound appealing, I do have my doubts and concerns, especially so when I know that they're dealing with the Frostbite engine, which takes a lot of time to like adjust things in. I also found out that I rather enjoy the new updates. There's always something for me to look forward to in new updates, even including the new Javelin changes in 1.04 is something that I looked forward to, and it gave me an incentive to test some new builds out. But of course that is just me, you don't have to agree with me. But again, I would rather see a working product rather than a prolonged mess, so I'm really conflicted about this. Go ahead and post your opinions down below. Anyway, let's finally go over some more interesting details, including some talks about Bioware and EA possibly facing a class action lawsuit for false advertising and misleading consumers. And yeah, I guess it makes sense. This is an increasingly popular topic amongst the discussion boards I'm visiting, and some users even suggested that the reason Bioware's statement from 2 days back was so dry was because of the fact that it was, and I quote, an attempt to insulate themselves and discredit the article in order to reduce EA's legal exposure. The response wasn't intended for gamers, it was intended for lawyers, which is why it was so tone-deaf to the community. It also seems that there's a lot of people lawyering up right now and talking about this possibility of actioning the studio and the company in court, and there's also comparisons to No Man's Sky's launch, which followed a very similar controversial route. If you remember, No Man's Sky was also allegedly sued for false advertising, but Advertising Standards Authority ruled out that it wasn't a case of misleading consumers, so it's really hard to say right now what the future holds. Of course, all countries have their different definitions of the term, legislations alongside with it, which makes properly assessing this situation quite difficult. No Man's Sky did make improvements though as the game progressed and as time went by. It's now in a much more different position, and the developers are also getting praised for the job that they did on it, but the difference here is that Hello Games was an indie company with no more than 20 employees at its best, while Bioware has EA on their back, tens of millions of dollars invested into these projects, and of course also hundreds of employees, a publisher that was already being accused anyway several times for misleading and false advertising on their premium games. So it's really hard to see what's going to happen in the future. Of course, I'm going to keep you guys updated along the way with this whole situation. As I said, I was planning to bring more games to the channel. I'm still planning to do that. There's a lot of stuff I want to cover on Division 2, Borderlands 3, No Man's Sky is also on my top priority list, as well as Anthem, so it's really hard to fit all of this in one single day, but we're gonna move forward and we're gonna make it all happen. In the meantime, as always, don't forget to comment down below, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'm gonna see you guys later, so peace out.